by the university. And part of my job is, as I said, making sure that they receive the best quality care that they can, and their welfare, so keeping them comfortable in their environment. And I know I wanted to just say a few words about welfare versus animal rights. So what we're going to talk about today is animal welfare, which is about the animal and their interaction with the environment and how they cope with any stressors that they're faced with. Versus animal rights would be when people believe that the animals should be treated like humans. And we focus on animal welfare because that takes into consideration all of the natural elements of their behavior rather than personifying them. And I guess with that, we'll start. And if anyone wants to ask any questions that they have, I'll do my best to answer them. And if I can't answer them, I'll find some good resources to send along to you.
All right. So who wants to start off with the first question? Caitlin.
So do you think that there is any value in animal rights at all, or in any type of situation?
Can you hear that?
Do you think it ever has value?
No, so maybe if you can,
Why don't you come up here?
The question. Yeah, or you can come up front, that works too.
Hi. So my question was, do you think that there's any situations where animal rights would have value? Or do you think it's situational?
I think that it definitely is something that's situational. I think that frequently the problem with animal rights is that they lean towards extremism, and don't always take into consideration the good that is happening with the animals in the situation. So I think that animal rights can be helpful to bring to light issues that I, as a veterinarian and as many producers, do know that exists and are doing their best to balance. So welfare is always about balancing the animal's natural needs versus what we can provide to them. So I think animal rights can bring to light those issues that we're working on. And the more and more that, as society is progressing, I think that the public's perception is becoming even more important to the way that animals are raised in agriculture. So some of the top issues right now in raising agricultural animals in particular is how the public thinks they're raised. And I think that animal rights can also bring to light what the public is looking for. And then it can become our goals as veterinarians, as scientists, as farmers, and as the public to find a balance between what is the public looking for, what does the animal need, how can we make a situation where we can combine both of those and have a healthy animal in a way that is good for the animal and that the public also likes. And how can we market that, and how can we keep that profitable for everyone involved? And I think that we do our best to solve those problems on our own, but sometimes it takes an outsider with a different view who can help really push to make changes and to represent what might be important to the public.
Very good answer. I might cut in really quick here, Elizabeth, because we have someone coming on Thursday.
Yeah.
So basically, when we castrate piglets, she believes that we should be giving them lidocaine or things like that. What is your feeling on that?
I think that the science has gone both ways. As a veterinarian, our gold standard is to provide as much analgesia as possible. However, when you're looking at a very young piglet, our interpretation is that it's a quick procedure that is generally not overtly painful for them. When we're dealing with older animals, we absolutely always want analgesia on board because they've had more time to develop more nerves, more sensory anatomy and be therefore a painful procedure. But when we're dealing with very young animals, animals that are a day old, while lidocaine is never the wrong choice, it certainly isn't required for such procedures due to their young age and the fact that they haven't developed all of those sensory nerves and anatomy yet.
That was very well put. Okay, who's next with questions? Emma.
Can I ask about the video we watched?
Yes.
Has to do with animal welfare.
Wiles Hog Farm. Death on a Factory Farm
Yeah.
is the video.
Hello. So we watched Death on a Factory Farm, and I've seen it twice now.
Where was it? Where did you see it before?
We watched it in judging class.
Okay.
But
This year or last year?
last year, yeah. But after watching it, I've heard many different views. Like, a lot of students and teachers have different views on the whole hanging of pigs. Have you seen the video? I assume.
I actually haven't seen the video yet.
Okay. So, their method of euthanizing, if you will, down sows was wrapping a chain around their neck and lifting them up with a forklift and hanging them, essentially. So in the court case, basically they weren't found guilty of anything because the vets that testified said that they couldn't say it was cruel because there was no like science behind it. There was no study done on it. But what is your opinion on that? Is that a method you think is appropriate?
So I like to revert all questions about euthanasia back to the American Veterinary Association's or Veterinary Medical Association, the AVMA's guidebook for euthanasia, where it outlines every way that is acceptable for every species of animals that you might be euthanizing, from a pig to a cow to cats and dogs to fish. And tells you what's acceptable with conditions and what's not acceptable. And they're actually in the process of revising it and taking in all the brand new scientific considerations since it was last published in 2013, I believe. And in there, I would say that would not be acceptable by the current AVMA guidelines, which again are always changing. And there have been leaps and bounds of improvement in animal welfare from the early 1900s to 1950s to 2000s to today. So it's always an evolving field. So if you're interested, that is a great resource to flip through while it is dense. You can find what's accepted. So I'll give an example, for a full groundhog, pentobarbital, so an IV injection of an overdose of an anesthetic agent, is the only entirely acceptable method that the AVMA says. After that, they list a whole variety of conditional methods. So you can use captive bolt, you can use electrocution, and you can use gas inhalation as your first method of euthanasia, followed by a secondary method to assure that the animal cannot wake up afterwards. In that, they also address the different types of slaughter that are performed for kosher or halal and discuss their views on that. And this is from a big board of veterinarians who have said that as long as the animal is very immediately rendered insensible and experiences minimal pain or distress, then that is considered a humane euthanasia. So I direct you there for questions about what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. I also really like everything that Temple Grandin has published and put out in her perspective on what's acceptable for euthanasia, what does insensible mean, and how quickly do we have to achieve that? What signs might we see from the animal if they are in fact rendered insensible very quickly versus if something goes wrong, and what signs we're not seeing. what I did find in doing a little research before talking to you all is that a lot of the changes in what's considered humane are driven by the food companies as well. So, for instance, McDonald's and other large purchasers of different meat products are really driving standards, and they're going out to the farms that they have contracts with and making sure that these animals are being rendered insensible within a certain period of time, so that it is a humane procedure. And I think it was 99% of animals needed to be slaughtered in such a way, and making sure that they're not using electric prods on these animals beforehand. So the food companies are also raising the bar about what they expect and performing inspections to make sure that they are using approved methods and they're being applied across the board to all of the animals entering into them.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna cut in really quick. I know you mentioned, you can come up, Jesse. Some professors, students having different opinions. How many of you guys have competed at national competition? I don't care if it's with the beef cattle, dairy cattle, livestock judging. Raise hands. Okay. I'll use the collegiate judging, for example, or even high school collegiate judging. When you guys go to that big competition at the national level, is there just one judge? No. Why is that? Okay. So, I don't care if you're in the cattle industry, hog industry, dog industry, whatever. People have their different opinions and their different standards, and that's why even at these big shows, there's more than one person that could find a class winner in that class, right? Based on opinions, but then they all talk and they come to a conclusion. It's the same thing with professors here at the college. You walk up in the horse barn. One teacher ties differently than I do. Another teacher breaks out horses differently than I do. I can tell you that faculty don't believe in breaking out 2-year-olds. Well, the world I come from, I'm the only one here that believes in breaking out 2-year-olds. It depends on where you go, your background. Okay. Not saying my opinion of breaking out a 2-year-old is wrong or right, but I'm also not saying the other faculty members who think it's wrong are wrong or right either. It's just people have their opinions. Be respected. But Elizabeth is very scientific and she answers things very well, more put than I do. So, all right, Jesse.
I like to.
Oh, okay. Quick question though, because I don't remember what it's called. When they said it in the video, when the hogs are tied up and they're dead, but their nerves are still making them like jolt around. What is that called, please?
Involuntary.
I don't know the right term for it, but it's insensible movement.
Okay.
So at that point in time, their brain is not controlling the movement. Their heart isn't beating, but it is a reaction of the nerves to move that way. It is what we look for when we do use, for instance, captive bolt, which causes this insensible movement, is we look at the head of the animal. And we want to make sure that the head isn't doing something representative of what the animal would be doing as if it were alive. So we don't want an animal to be lifting its head looking around. We don't want an animal to be lifting its front end trying to right itself. But if the animal is making these insensible movements, so paddling the front legs, paddling the back legs, moving around but not trying to lift their head, lift their body back into standing, then that qualifies as the insensible movements. And depending on the age and size of the animal, they can last a short period of time and before we move on to the secondary method of euthanasia, which may be exsanguination or a different method based on what you're doing with the animal. But again, it's those insensible movements, one of the criteria of making sure that we are humanely euthanizing them.
Okay, thank you. That was my question, how to tell the difference between insensible movement and like an animal fighting for life before it bleeds out or something. Like,
And I
remember in
think
the movie where
it's really hard to describe to you all, and if you do a Google, there are so many crazy things out there, it is probably very difficult to find a video. So I'll give you my firsthand experience of insensible movement. It is weird to see the first time if you haven't seen it before. But you can really pick up on what it looks like after seeing it a few times. And I can attest that my experience has been, it is very different than what you'd see an animal doing if they were conscious and awake. And it's essentially, it's very similar to them having a grand mal seizure. So they are not with you, they don't know what's happening, they're not feeling any pain. And it's almost seizure-like activity that then ceases as all of those neurons stop firing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Rachel? Do you have anything to ask? Whatever you guys want to. Okay. See, I'm getting better with you as soon as I figure out shots.
Wait, I might need more questions. I don't know which one to ask.
Whatever you want to ask. Elizabeth's very intelligent. She's very good at answering.
I like to go read about things, so I will say that I guess you all might know more about these things firsthand than I do, but I like to go read. So I did come across a lot of good resources just touching up on what I know about welfare and agriculture and slaughter. So I'm happy to pass those resources along as well so that you all can see where I got my facts from. And you can have these resources to look into if you have additional questions moving forward or want to go reading some more. I can always pass those along. I found some really good handbooks and different articles.
All right. So my question is, being from the research industry and with so many people having different opinions on it and different views, I know you're careful with who you tell what your career is. What kind of run-ins do you have with different advocates with different views, and how do you usually handle those?
So I guess I gauge who I talk to about what I do fully. My primary role here is, in fact, to be a veterinarian. I have taken an oath to first do no harm and to have my goal always be to protect the welfare of animals. Knowing that not everyone always can see that way and that about 50% of the public is opposed to animals in research, if I'm just passing by, not going to actually chat with someone or get to know someone, I'll just say I'm a veterinarian, go on. But with you all, I want to educate you, and I want to educate the public as well, as long as they're willing to listen. So I am always thrilled to have the opportunity to talk about what I do. And frequently, I'll start with saying I would rather be an animal in research than an animal anywhere else. Truly, our animals are so happy and have beautiful places to live, and they don't really experience any pain and suffering. I mean, we always laugh because if your cat vomits once, it might wait a week before it goes to the vet and then find out it's something. If one of our cats in research vomits, we are called immediately, and we immediately go give it a physical exam and a full workup. So they receive faster veterinary care than most other animals out there, and they truly live in clean and wonderful environments and are treated with respect absolutely every day. I work in an industry where everything is very highly regulated by all different realms of government and private organizations who are here inspecting us, enforcing the rules, and making sure that we truly are following them to the greatest extent. But I think what's unique about what I do is that everyone is here for the animals. No one is here because they want to do something bad or malicious. They're here because they want to see a better tomorrow where humans receive the best medical care possible and where animals receive the best medical care possible, and we have a thriving agricultural society where we can keep ourselves fed sustainably. And every single one of the veterinarians that I work with, every single one of the technicians, and every single one of the researchers really wants to make sure that they're doing their best to use animals responsibly and keep them comfortable, happy, give them the absolute best life we can offer them. I guess I haven't encountered much resistance yet, but part of my training here, as I am a resident, so I still have to take classes, just like you all, is learning about how to deal with people with more extreme views. And there are times that you can change people's opinions, and there are times that you can't. So if I were to be faced with one of those situations, I just try to come at it with the scientific facts and leave any of my feelings out of it, as well as address whatever they have to say. And we can always chat about the validity of both sides of our arguments and try to put aside any of the differences that we might not agree on. But it definitely is a challenge that I'm sure I will face moving forward, and see how it goes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we have someone else coming up.
Right? Yeah, it's really weird to not be able to see you all. It's okay though.
Okay.
So I don't really have a question about like how like you are with animals and everything like that. My more of a question is how you like Colorado State in general, like how your experiences
Okay.
are there.
So far, my experience has been wonderful. I've only been out here since the end of May, so I've only had a few months here. This is my third land-grant university that I've been at. So I went from UConn to Iowa State here to Colorado State. And what I found across the board is that all of these larger land-grant universities have a really diverse opportunities. And of course, I've always kind of focused on animals and agriculture and science, but I know that there's much more outside of that. I'm just gonna say across the board for all three, there are lots of opportunities to get involved with animals, lots of opportunities to do just about any kind of research you want. And here in Colorado, it's sunny 300 days a year, so that's nice as well. And we have a lot of leading researchers, leading clinicians who are doing very cutting edge medicine and science. So for me as a veterinarian, that's very exciting as well.
Thank you.
All right, I guess I'll have something to ask really quickly. So I remember
Yeah.
when you were in vet school, you had to go to some hog farms. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay. Talk about any time, maybe give an example, any time someone looked at you, maybe as a young person, not, and you got kind of have you ever gotten a negative pushback going onto one of those farms and suggesting something or,
Yeah. As a veterinarian, that is part of our life. I don't know if you've all brought your own animals to the vet, but owners never like to hear what you have to say, because what I have to say is bad news or costing money. I guess swine farms in the Midwest are a little different than everything on the East Coast, so I had a lot to learn having seen just backyard hogs where you have a couple, they live in their little outdoor pens, and in Iowa there are lots of people who might own 1,000 hogs split over several sites. So it was a little bit different. Usually we wouldn't be met by the owner of the hogs or the owner of the facility, but a worker who was there who could let us in and tell us a little bit about what was going on. For the most part, for a large scale hog production, what we're doing is we're taking a look at all of the animals, taking a walk through the facility, seeing what's happening in the facility, seeing what's happening with the pigs, and usually trying to do a necropsy to get more information about what's causing the disease in the pigs, and taking any samples back with us. For the most part, I think most of the producers out there are pretty amenable. They know what to expect. They know that we're likely going to ask if we can sacrifice a few pigs to try to save the whole herd. When it comes to agriculture, it's pretty easy to bring it down to the economics and say, hey, we'd like to sacrifice 2 of your piglets here, but we're hoping that we can get an answer and implement a treatment that will help your herd of 3,000. And I think that's very helpful. So for the most part, that goes pretty well. To go to Leah's question, I think it's easier to relate when you're dealing with small animal clients who say, well, Fluffy doesn't need that medication, doesn't need that test, I'll just take him home and he'll be okay. And when I reach that kind of resistance, I try to think about, okay, I have to be the animal's advocate. It's my job to assure that they are getting the best care that they can. So If an owner is apprehensive to go forward with the treatment that I know the animal they need, try to emphasize the benefit. And again, it often comes down to cost. So we'll talk about different options. Say, hey, maybe you're leaning away from this for this reason. Let's look at alternatives. And try to meet the owner, the producer, whoever I'm chatting with halfway. To achieve that, whether you're going to be a vet, whether you're going to be a producer, whether you're going to be a manager, I think you have to understand the goals of whoever you're talking with. So you can have a conversation starting with asking them what they hope to get out of that talk today. So sometimes when I have a client coming in, I'll say, tell me why you're here today. What can I help you with? Why are you bringing Fluffy in today? And if we go down a line, I try to gauge how they're feeling. I'll ask them, what questions do you have about this? Or how does this all sound to you? Or offer them a few alternatives and say, what are your thoughts on each of them? And that allows them to be a participant rather than me just spewing science at them and saying, this is what you have to choose. And the last thing that I like to do, which I think applies across the board to any interest that you may have, is rather than ending my conversation with, do you have any questions for me? Because it's so easy to say no and walk out the door, asking, what questions do you have for me? Because chances are they probably have questions. They might not want to come out and say it, they might want to get out the door. But by asking what questions do you have for me, it makes them think and say, well, you don't want to say I don't have no questions. It looks silly. So makes them bring up whatever's on their mind and make sure that we're leaving with a good relationship and that I've answered any qualms that they may still have about what happened that day or what the plan is moving forward. And I think that makes you more trustworthy, makes you more approachable, and also shows that you're truly committed to what your cause is that day.
Thank you. Kyle.
Hi, I just had a quick question. Was there anything that, like, an animal activist or animal activist group has ever said to you that you agree with, that your line of work doesn't necessarily agree with?
I haven't had anything from an animal rights group that they have said that I haven't agreed with. However, I do like to read up, and I wouldn't group them into animal activists or animal rights, but there are different groups that are looking into what other benefits we can make outside of traditional housing. And I do think that they drive what's happening in the industry. So I'll have a few examples. So first off, if we look at farrowing crates and gestation crates in swine, the European Union has placed legislation to try to phase them out and ban them. We know that they can decrease mortality, or they can decrease mortality 50% and save a lot of those piglets that do get crushed in those first few days of life and have definite benefits. From the veterinary standpoint, when sows are mixed in the first 35 days after fetus implantation, they are at a high risk for abortion. And we know that keeping them in crates and not mixing them at that time truly increases their reproductive success, and that having them in the farrowing crate when they farrow out, again, we decrease that mortality so greatly and see so many more piglets surviving to weaning. On the other side, I do understand what is being said about limiting the sow space. And I think that farrowing crates need to be done right. They need to have enough space to get up and move around. I'll bring it back. Temple Grandin, again, reading all that she has to say, points out that sows with pressure sores from being in an incorrectly sized crate, if they go to market, that meat can't be used in those regions, and they're at a much higher risk of bacterial contamination. So I do like to listen to the arguments of, again, not animal rights or animal activists, but those who do push for a different way of raising the animals. So if sows could be raised outside of crates and not squish their piglets, that would be wonderful. I think that there are potential advancements in the future where that could be a possibility. And to have sows that don't need gestation crates and can be in with each other without tail biting, without showing aggression over food, also possibilities in the future. So again, not animal rights, not animal activists. I think they're coming at it with a scientific perspective that counters the industry standard. And I do think there's truth in what they're saying. I think that we might be 10 years away from being able to achieve those sustainably and to overcome the other side of the argument, which is, hey, let's look at aggression and tail biting and squishing piglets. Similar with the poultry industry. I mean, we have this big move for the organic free-range laying hens, but cannibalism is a huge problem, and parasitism, and lots of other problems that you encounter when you have a chicken who's out and about on grass rather than raised inside of a cage. So I see the other side of their argument as well, and I'd love to be a utopian society where we can have them raised that way, but I think we need more scientific advancements to get there. So I think that some of those other perspectives can help drive advancements in science and research in the industry, and maybe we all, the young people today, can make this a possibility 10 years down the road to have animals that have overcome these challenges, and we can raise I'll go back to the beginning, a setting that the population really seems to like.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Bridget, you're quiet today.
All the ones that I thought about were like similar to what's already been on us.
All right, go ahead. Yes.
I was just curious on why you chose to specialize in swine in your veterinary field.
Yeah. So to clarify, right now for my residency, I get to do everything. So I helped birth some kittens this morning, and last week I was taking care of fish, and sheep make up a giant proportion of what the animals that I take care of right now. So I do get to do everything. However, during vet school, I did focus on swine. I'm from Connecticut originally, where we have 800 swine. So not very many, and came out to Iowa, where there are 3 pigs for every 1 person, so a giant increase. And I liked pigs a lot when I was growing up in Connecticut. I think they're very smart and they're very social, so that they interact with you more than many other species do, and they love to problem solve. When I got out to Iowa State, I figured I'm here in Iowa, and there are all of these pigs. There are all of these pig experts. This is a wonderful place to expand my knowledge. I've also really liked infectious diseases. I think it's interesting to see how disease spreads, whether it's a bacteria, a virus, a parasite. And pigs are one of the best at getting different diseases, part of why we raise them the way that we do right now. So I thought that it would be a good opportunity to look into my interest in these smart and inquisitive animals and all of the problems that they seem to be so good at getting. The other reason that I chose it is I found the right group of people, and I guess that's one of my recommendations moving forward for anyone who wants to do research, or for those of you getting a job, get to know the people that you're interviewing with. You have to be with them every single day. So find people that you enjoy being with every day, and find a mentor who's willing to teach you everything you want to know. I found those people, and they happened to join my interests in both pigs and their diseases, and so it kind of was a match made in heaven to have a good mentor and do the 2 things that I was very interested in a part of the country that had lots and lots of pigs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we'll have time for one more question after Kim.
Hi. Okay. So, going back to animal welfare, what are your views regarding chemical treatments and holistic treatments?
As far as different medical treatments for animals?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I have a kind of unique perspective is that I think that there's value in both. I'll talk about the holistic perspective first. During vet school and with the vet that I previously worked for, have seen acupuncture do a lot of good. I've worked for vets that believe in Chinese herbs. I've been on production sites where they try to take a more holistic approach and use things like diatomaceous earth and such. I definitely think they have their place. I mean, acupuncture has been around for thousands of years. We know it does something, we just haven't figured out the science to prove it yet. So I think they all have their place. That being said, I also did 4 years of medical training, so medicine also has a big place. One example I like to use is parasites, especially in dogs and cats. What we have found is that it doesn't matter what you do the holistic way, it's not going to cut it. The fleas and the ticks, they figure it out. You need to have chemicals to keep those guys away and keep your pets safe from the flea and tick-borne diseases that can be carried to them. And in lots of situations, truly, surgery and medicine are required. I mean, you're not going to be able to fix a cat with kidney disease or a cat with mastitis without using antibiotics and other drugs that we have come so far to develop. And surgery, of course, there frequently aren't other holistic alternatives too. So I think it's a balance. As a veterinarian, you balance your clientele base. So what's your client interested in? There are lots of people that if you were to mention acupuncture, they'd think I'm crazy and not want to take their animals to me at all. And then there are people who are faced with the idea of, I don't want to use antibiotics. What else can I do? So it's a balance. I believe that both Eastern and Western medicine have their abilities, and it's my job as a doctor to balance the two. And I think everyone has their different perspective in the medical field on it. I mean, you might go to your doctor and think that if you go to the chiropractor that you're crazy. So it's a balance. Everyone has their own opinion. Again, I think we're just starting to tap into the science of Eastern medicine. And of course, we have a great deal of science here for Western medicine. And perhaps it can be the best of both worlds if we combine the two.
Cool. Thanks.
So I just want to ask, ever since you graduated, what has been like your most experience or like your most eventful experience or educating experience that like made you really want to continue doing animal research so far?
Yeah. I guess I had a lot of experience as an undergraduate and during vet school helping out with different projects. I do like emergency medicine a lot. So one of my favorite, well, not my favorite for the animal's sake, but it's getting called when there is an emergency and being able to act quickly and minimize any pain or suffering. It happens. I mean, things break their legs, things get skin disease, things have coughs. It's no different than being in any other practice where people bring in their pet who has diarrhea or their sheep who's coughing. It's all the same process. The only difference for me, I think, is that I deal with researchers versus a pet owner. So there are some differences in, again, finances and their emotional connection. But I don't think my job is much different than what other veterinarian would do. The researchers are still fully committed to their animals. They have a big financial, emotional time. All of those things have been invested into them, so they want to see their animals succeed and be healthy as well. My favorite thing, I think, about being a research veterinarian is that I get to work with everything. My other consideration was just going and being a mixed animal practitioner where I'd see cats, dogs, sheep, cattle, pigs, and horses. And that just scratches the surface. I see fish, I see stingrays, I see rabbits, we just got crocodiles, birds. So we get to see a little bit of everything. And so I have to know a lot more, and I do a lot of reading to keep up on all the different species and how I can best serve them to keep them comfortable and happy and healthy and to fulfill their purpose as advancing scientific knowledge.
Do you also feel that you have to like make yourself not have a lot of emotion towards your practice?
No, I actually, I think that we get to have just about the same amount. We do, as veterinarians here in research and elsewhere, talk a lot about compassion fatigue. So yes, I do have to euthanize more mice than the average veterinarian does. But part of our institution and part of most research institutions, they do have measures in place to address that. So we let people name the animals. They have names, we know them, we know who's who. And if they do reach an endpoint where they will be euthanized, we allow people to come and express any grief that they might have. And I honestly don't feel like I spend more time around death or euthanasia than your average veterinarian does, who's euthanizing sick animals, old animals brought in by their owners. The difference for me is I get to follow up on every single patient. I never have something come in that I see one time and I'm left wondering what happened to them. Did their owner get them the care that they need? Did they die at home? I follow up on every single one of my patients. I can visit them all every single day if I wanted to and see how they're doing, give them more treatment. And to me, that gives me a little bit more rest. I'm never going home at night wondering, oh, did I do all that I could do? Is the owner going to follow up? Will they get the treatments? Because I'm the one in charge. I'm the one implementing it. And I get to make sure from start of when I see the patient until the end that they truly are receiving all the care. So I think that helps offset the fact that I do, yes, euthanize more mice than other people and things like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question for Elizabeth? All right. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk to us. I really, really appreciate it.
No problem. And again, I will send over that I read up on to make sure I can give you the most up-to-date information. And if you have questions moving forward, I'm always happy to chat about them via phone or email. Questions about welfare, questions about agriculture, about vet school, or research, or any of that. So yeah, you have me as a resource, and please do reach out if you have any additional questions.
Thank you. I will catch up with you later on. Thank you so much.
Have a good evening, everyone.
All right, guys, so really quick, I just want to go over a couple things. So I heard Elizabeth talk a lot about